This is the guy you want to be talking to today because England was so very close, and he is proudly an American, but he told us that he was not going to hope before they played Germany, and then they beat Germany, and they make their way through the slalom course, and they get as close as you can get, and he had to have hoped, and then a kick right in the balls, right in Roger Bennett's, a good, swift kick in England's balls that then not only doesn't win them a championship, but unleashes a torrent of racism as well. So the ugliest part of the country makes an appearance. His new book, Reborn in the USA, An Englishman's Love Letter to His Chosen Home, is available now. Where are you emotionally? Because you had to have hoped. I mean, you score 4 minutes in, Roger. Thank you for being on with us. You had to have arrived in a place where you thought to yourself, "No, we're going to do this time."
Well, I want to be clear. Up top, I ride with Team America now. Just point out there. So I cover this utterly objectively without any emotion whatsoever. But at the same time, I can measure my life in England's footballing agony, self-sabotage, dreams, shattered dreams, and abject failure. And just to put into context for your listeners, I mean, this tournament was like watching the New York Knicks just pull it together, somehow just defang their inner Knicksiness and make it to the NBA finals and touch greatness. It was like my book being number one in the New York Times bestseller list, which I crap you not is arguably a bigger shock to me than the fact that England actually made a final. But I mean, I don't know how you want to talk about this. This was like Sisyphus in cleats and polyester jerseys rolling that rock so bloody close to the top of the mountain. And then just at the very last, when I had one more push to go, seeing it feebly fall out of his fingers, roll over his feet on the way down and just go all the way down. And I will say, the inner Englishman, which still lies within the little tiny Englishness that's left, the innate Englishness, there was something crushing that I can talk about for like my family, my friends, just the nation of England in this moment, which is truly dark. But also there was a little bit of me which is like, that's so reassuring. Don't take away my losing. Don't let me win. You know, the Battle of Hastings, the Battle of Saratoga, Scott of the Antarctic, Dunkirk. That's what we love. That's who we are. We are losers. Do not take away our losing. So there was a lot of emotion, Dan.
Should Southgate be fired?
Sacked.
Sorry, I think somebody's got Talk Sport in the English talk radio on in the background that just cut in. I need his head on a platter. He must go. No, Gareth Southgate must not be fired. He must be promoted. This man, if you do not know who he is, America, this man is the last sane human being of any kind left in England. I mean, his emotional intelligence. This man inherited a team in a fractured nation. The joy of international football is, like, I love American sports. I love them in the face. But the joy of international football is that it holds up a mirror to the nations that surround them. And I've got to say, as you hinted in your introduction, Dan, England is a very place of wonder, place of challenge, deep, deep challenge. And ahead of this tournament, fans got to come back into the stadium for the first time to see their team. For 17 months, they've been in agony and lockdown. They could watch. What did they do the first time they came to see them? They booed them for taking the knee. All those months they'd waited, and that is what they bloody did. And he had to navigate press conference after press conference where he wasn't talking about football or the Euros. He had to, as an ambassador and a remarkable human being. One newspaper journalist described him as a World War I officer in the trenches who is beloved by all the men and secretly writes World War I poetry, which I love. He defanged the English press and led the nation to a place of perceived unity. It was fleeting unity and it wasn't real unity, but he gave them joy. He gave them incredible memories. And through this team of young players, so diverse, so talented, but above all, willing to reinvent what it means to be a modern footballer. These guys were not chugging the champagne, doing the club, the bottle service, crashing the Lambo, buying a new Lambo. They were using their platforms as a force of good to campaign for LGBTQ rights, anti-racism, child poverty, hunger, mental illness. They were a modern face, a happy face of Britain a fleeting face of Britain, but it's the one that I hope comes to be, and it's all because of Gareth then.
That and Jack Grealish did all the partying for the lot of them.
Probably Jack, God love, there was a great one of the great moments when this video is made. The DVD of England's campaign will be when one journalist asked him where he thinks he fits into the encyclopedia of English football history, and his honest response was, "What's an encyclopedia?"
Do you think there is any criticism that is fair? And I know we play results, and you just gave us all the reasons not to fire a coach. It's the easiest thing to do. But is there a fairer criticism than 19-year-old in that spot when he's never taken a penalty kick? Never mind in that spot.
So, Gareth, 1996, England are in their last semi-final in the Euros. It goes to penalties against dread rival Germany. Who takes the crucial kick? It's this quite mediocre, but, truly committed. I love Joey Cora. He's one of my favorite American athletes of all time, because he gave his all. He was tenacious. Gareth Southgate was kind of like a slightly more talented Joey Cora, and he stepped up in that moment and he took the crucial penalty, and he missed that crucial penalty. And that was a life trauma for him. I mean, he talks about how inmates wrote him letters saying, "My life of crime started when you were knocked out against Germany. My life of crime and my imprisonment is all your fault." I joke not. I mean, this was a massive trauma that has haunted him. He talks about it beautifully. "This will never heal. The pain I caused my teammates, I can never run away from. But the worst of times, how you learn from them makes you a better human being." Oh my God, emotional intelligence. So yet again, oh my God, the sport of narrative, human theatre, writ large, guys. And he's in penalties in the greatest game of his life. And it was retrospectively an awful, awful decision to send these kids, knowing, I mean, for me, they could score, but the odds are they could also miss. These kids are 19 and 20. They are going to play for England for 10, 12 years, please God. And just to expose them to that kind of risk, the damage to them that has now occurred. And by the way, the damage that's now occurred is so disgusting. And there is a side, it's not a fringe part of England. It's very much, this is England of Brexit. This is England of human darkness. This is England of Piers Morgan. This is parochial England, angry England, that have it's humiliating. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. And they have had at these kids in the most disgusting way. And ultimately, I believe that Gareth Southgate will rue that decision in the moment as much as he rues that dark day when he missed his own penalty. Probably actually knowing him, he will rue it all the more.
But Roger, don't you think those kids want to be in that spot? I mean, they've worked their entire lives to be in that spot. Don't you think they want that?
And the argument can be made, right? If he makes the kick,
yes.
Holy shit, a star is born. Next 10 years of English soccer, you've just given somebody enormous confidence in a statistical situation where even with the pressure, Roger,
right.
Even with the pressure, the odds are greatly in the kicker's favor, even with the pressure.
Dan, I would like you to manage the US men's national team. I love the way you think about football. Can we all just agree that a penalty shootout is the single worst way to end a game of football that possibly could be invented? I think you can make the case.
Do you have a better one? Do you have a better one?
Yeah, have the managers do a dance-off. I mean, for God's sake, that has as much to do with what preceded it. I would love it. Gareth Southgate against Mancini, throwing shapes, just limbs. I mean, the world would watch that endlessly. Just think of the TikTok views, man. I mean, it's insane. It is utterly insane. You think about football, it is a collective game. It is a collective game. And suddenly they're like, we've run out of time. We've got to get this on. Let's make it an individual game. Let's make it about that dread walk that you can never practice for. These kids, I've seen them in training. These kids, they can do just penalty. I mean, they can do penalties like left foot, right foot, top corner, back corner. They can like spin round and just fart the ball out of their anus. It's incredible. They can do everything with it. But you cannot practice. You cannot practice the unique crucible of pressure that walk under that pressure. They had no way of knowing. And some managers, to answer your question mildly seriously, Jurgen Klinsmann, ahead of 2014 World Cup, suddenly at the last picked a number of very young obscure Americans I interviewed. One was DeAndre Yedlin, who kept, when I interviewed him, I was like, how do you feel to be here on the brink of a World Cup? And he was kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing, man. Like a year ago, I was playing for the Akron Zips. I don't know why I'm here. And then I made this film about the US team for ESPN. And then I cut to Jurgen and I said, why did you choose this guy? He doesn't know why he's here. And he said, sometimes you are so young, you do not know you are meant to be afraid. And I think that that ultimately, as a manager, you feel that your 19-year-old, yes, you know they're young, but they don't know enough to know they're meant to be afraid. But I think what we saw yesterday was, yes, you are 19. Sometimes you do not know enough to execute with that veteran savvy experience. And the post-mortem, the fact that there were a number of bona fide superstars who did not shoot will haunt England. But at the same time, to flip-flop, the psychology of the penalty, there's a theory, but there's a number of psychologists who spend their life obsessing and studying penalty shootouts because it's the greatest way to see how human beings perform under extreme pressure. And you saw earlier in the tournament, Mbappe, a Frenchman who's one of the great young talents that's ever played the game, when France's game was on the line, he took the penalty in the shootout and missed. There's a thing called the superstar phenomenon, which says that the bigger the star, we've seen Zidane miss penalties. We saw Baggio, the greatest Italian in that 1994 team, blast his over the bar. The bigger the player is, actually, the bigger the pressure. So it's a lottery. It's Russian roulette. You may as well have sent these kids out and said, okay, guys, play Russian roulette. That'll fix it. Penalty shootouts suck.
Guillermo, put it on the poll at Batard show. All of these things. Do penalty shootouts suck? Because America does not agree with him. Is Joey Cora the favorite athlete of anybody outside of the Cora family? And can soccer?
I guess he's not even the favorite in the Cora family.
Exactly.
And can soccer players score by farting the ball out of their anus?
Oh, that's a yes. And anybody that says no is a liar. Second, by the way, on the Cora thing, I did an interview because I love the White Sox, and I did an interview when I threw the pitch out at the New Comiskey, and I was talking about my love of Joey Cora, and there was like an old-time legendary producer for the Chicago White Sox who just started joyfully rustling under his desk, and he went under his desk while I was like doing the interview, and then he pulled out pulled out a Joey Cora signed White Sox jersey that I think had been under his desk for about 15 years. It was like watching an archaeologist genuinely felt like a lost scroll from the mud. It was like caked in crap. And he's like, oh my God, you have it. He just threw it on. And I got to tell you, I have 3 jerseys in my basement hung on a wall. I have Lionel Messi, Barcelona jersey signed, next to a Carly Lloyd, US Women's National Team World Championship jersey. And to the left of that, I have a signed Joey Cora jersey, and they're all, to me, on a level of goatness.
His new book, Reborn in the USA, An Englishman's Love Letter to His Chosen Home. It is available now. You mentioned the humiliation of the racism that was unleashed in that moment as you get that close to hope, and you see the ugly side of sports when the emotion business becomes unreasonable and the athletes are no longer human beings. They're just there to be receptacles for your hate. And yet, Roger, I think a lot of people, I was getting texts as it was happening before the result happened. Don't let it happen this way because of how predictable the racist response was.
I mean, I gotta say, there's a point in the game where it hung in the balance. You know, England opened the scoring almost too early, 2 minutes inside, and I'm a long-time Chicago Bears fan. It was just like watching Hester take the opening kick of the Super Bowl to the house, and I was like, "Oh my God, we made a terrible mistake." and Italy came back as everyone knew they would do. And there was a moment where the game kind of hung in the balance, and England did retreat to their inner Englishness. They're a very talented team, and they should have been more proactive. They should have been more positive, more ambitious, more commanding, but they never were. Just like the inner thousands of years of Englishness just overtook them, and their jersey started to feel as heavy as chainmail. And in that moment, I did actually think there's 2 scenarios here. Either England are going to win, and those people are going to destroy the country, or England are going to lose, and those people are going to destroy the country. And I've got to be candid, I think it would have happened either way. Ultimately, there's no hiding from it that England is, I mean, the lockdown there, I mean, Italy had a terrible lockdown. So many places in Europe had terrible lockdowns. A lockdown in England was was long and brutal and botched, really botched, and it had a strain of just the fear of the foreigner that baked into it in the ugliest of way. The Brexit that came before it is still, I mean, resounding as one of the darkest chapters in British history. And so what we saw, it's not football hooligan, to say they're just football hooligans is to do them a favor and to give them mild respect. It's just a fascistic, it's just a self-loathing. It's pure the face of hate. And it's not just an English thing. Sadly, we know from our country all too well that it exists and is kind of polarized by the social media. The thing that's disgusting in England to me is that the leader of the country, the leader of the bloody country could have silenced it early on, had a long time to address it, like a week when this was going on, and almost to his silence encouraged it, stoked it, reveled in it, and it's repulsive, and it's I care for the English national team. I know it brings my father great happiness, my mother great happiness, my brother, my family, my friends. I know that it could bring joy to the nation, and honestly, I do believe that the nation really needed this. My God, it needed it. But when you see that, and you see how they acted before the game, and you saw how they acted during the game, trying to crash the stadium, fight stewards to get in. And then after the game, it's, as an English person, and it brings back memories of the 1980s when I used to go to games like everybody, and it was like every game felt like that. It's heart-wrenching, and I do not understand it, and it disgusts me to my core.